Christianity, Democracy, and the American Ideal, a Jacques Maritain reader, compiled and edited by James P. Kelly III. Chapter 12, Kneeling Before the World, Truth and Fellowship. Maritain was one of the first to sound the alarm over moral relativism. As the French ambassador to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, he witnessed internationalists' efforts to build a global ethic to which all nations could subscribe. Unfortunately, as is the case with similar present efforts, participants adhering to a truth, such as the sanctity of human life, are required to jettison their beliefs for the purpose of achieving consensus, whether named Education for Democratic Citizenship, Human Rights Education, or Education for a Culture of Peace. These initiatives threaten to give rise to a coerced, not genuine form of fellowship. The problem of truth and human fellowship is important for democratic societies. It seems to me to be particularly important for America, where men and women coming from a great diversity of national stocks and religious or philosophical creeds have to live together. If each of them endeavored to impose his own convictions and the truth in which he believes on all his co-citizens, would not living together become impossible? That is obviously right. Well, it is easy, too easy, to go a step further and to ask, if each one sticks to his own convictions, will not each one endeavor to impose his own conviction on all others? So that, as a result, living together will become impossible if any citizen whatever sticks to his own convictions and believes in a given truth. Thus, it is not unusual to meet people who think that not to believe in any truth, or not to adhere firmly to any assertion as unshakably true in itself, is a primary condition required of democratic citizens in order to be tolerant of one another and to live in peace with one another. May I say that these people are, in fact, the most intolerant people, for if, perchance, they were to believe in something as unshakably true, they would feel compelled, by the same stroke, to impose by force and coercion their own belief on their co-citizens. The only remedy they have found to get rid of their abiding tendency to fanaticism is to cut themselves off from truth. This is a suicidal method, and it is a suicidal conception of democracy. Not only would a democratic society that lived on universal skepticism condemn itself to death by starvation, but it would also enter a process of self-annihilation, from the very fact that no democratic society can live without a common practical belief in those truths which are freedom, justice, law, and other tenets of democracy, and that any belief in these things as objectively and unshakably true, as well as in any other kind of truth, would be brought to naught by the preassumed law of universal skepticism. How, then, under these circumstances, is an agreement conceivable among men assembled for the purpose of jointly accomplishing a task dealing with the future of the mind, who come from the four corners of the earth, and who belong not only to different cultures and civilizations, but to different spiritual lineages and antagonistic schools of thought? Should an agency like UNESCO throw up the game, give up any assertion of common views and common principles, and be satisfied only in compiling documents, surveys, factual data, and statistics? Or should it, on the contrary, endeavor to establish some artificial conformity of minds and to define some doctrinal denominator which would be likely, in the course of discussion, to be reduced to the vanishing point? The ideological agreement that is necessary between those who work toward making science, culture, and education contribute to the establishment of a true peace is restricted to a certain body of practical points and principles of action. But within these limits there is, and there must be, an ideological agreement that, for all its merely practical nature, is nonetheless of major importance. Owing to the historical development of mankind, to ever-widening crises in the modern world, and to the advance, however precarious, of moral conscience and reflection, Men have today become aware more fully than before, although still imperfectly, of a number of practical truths regarding their life in common upon which they can agree, but which are derived in the thought of each of them, depending on their ideological allegiances, their philosophical and religious traditions, their cultural backgrounds, and their historical experiences, from extremely different or even basically opposed theoretical conceptions. In reality, it is through rational means, that is, through persuasion, not coercion, that man is bound by his very nature to try to induce others to share in what he knows or claims to know as true and just. I distrust any easy and comfortable friendship between believers of all denominations. I mean a friendship that is not accompanied, as it were, by a kind of compunction or soul's sorrow. Just as I distrust any universalism that claims to unite in one and the same service of God, and in one and the same transcendental piety, as in some World's Fair temple, all forms of belief and all forms of worship. Let us beware of those brotherly dialogues in which everyone is in raptures while listening to the heresies, blasphemies, stuff, and nonsense of the other. They are not brotherly at all. It has never been recommended to confuse loving with seeking to please. There is, nowadays, among a good many Christians, and even, without their clearly realizing it, perhaps, among an alarming number of priests and consecrated people, it is these clerics, above all, whom I have in mind, a marked tendency to give efficacy primacy over truth. The present crisis has many diverse aspects. One of the most curious spectacles it offers us is a kind of kneeling before the world, which is revealed in 1,000 ways. What, then, do we see around us? In large sectors of both clergy and laity, but it is the clergy who set the example, hardly is the word world pronounced when a gleam of ecstasy lights up the face of one and all. That a good many Christians today kneel before the world is a fact perfectly clear, and this is what we have to look at first of all. But of what world precisely are we dealing with here? In other words, what do these Christians have in their mind? What do they think in behaving this way? This is a good deal more obscure because, for the most part, they think very little and confusedly. Accordingly, at least in practice and in their way of acting, and even for those who are boldest and most determined to go the whole way, in doctrine and in their way of thinking about the world and their own religion, the great concern and the only thing that matters for them is the temporal vocation of the human race, with its march, embattled but victorious, to justice, peace, and happiness. Instead of realizing that our devotion to the temporal task must be that much firmer and more ardent, since we know that the human race will never succeed on this earth in delivering itself completely from evil, because of the wounds of Adam, and because our ultimate end is supernatural, they make of these earthly goals the truly supreme end for humanity. In other words, there is henceforth only the earth, a complete temporalization of Christianity. It is not community of race, of class, or of nation, but the love of charity that makes us what we ought to be, members of the family of God, of the only community where each person, drawn out from his fundamental loneliness, truly communicates with others and truly makes them his brothers, by giving himself to them and, in a certain sense, dying for them. Nothing that has ever been said points out more profoundly the mystery and dignity of the human person. Who is my neighbor? The man of my blood? Of my party? The man who does me good? No, it is the man to whom I show mercy, the man to whom is transmitted through me the universal gift and love of God, who makes the rain from heaven fall upon both the good and the wicked.